American Scandal uses dramatizations that are based on true events. Some elements, including dialogue, might be invented, but everything is based on historical research. It's the morning of July 19th, 1969, in Berkeley Heights, New Jersey. Gwen Kopechne, a 51-year-old homemaker, is in her kitchen cleaning up after breakfast while her husband is off at the hardware store. Kopechne takes a pair of dirty plates from the kitchen table and dunks them in the soapy water in the sink. As she begins to scrub, Kopechne's mind wanders to her 28-year-old daughter, Mary Jo. Mary Jo is spending the weekend on Martha's Vineyard, attending a party for staffers for Robert Kennedy's presidential run last year. She's there with half a dozen other women who worked on the Kopechne won't feel ease, and she hears from her. Hello, Kopechne residents. Yes, this is Senator Ted Kennedy. Kopechne feels a jolt in her chest. Her daughter has worked with the Kennedys for several years, but this is the first time anyone... Hello, I recognize your voice. Playing your Vietnam speech on TV. I want you to know we're in your corner. And in 72, I think you're just what the country needs. Well, thank you, ma'am. That's very kind of you to say. Will your husband be back soon? I with him. Now Kopechne picks up the uneasiness in Kennedy's voice. Well, Joe's at the store. He'll be home in about an hour. Is everything okay, sir? Are you on the vineyard with Mary Jo and the other girls still? Yeah, I'm still here. I'm actually in Edgartown at the police station, and that's why I'm calling. Kopechne feels a twist of dread in her stomach. Police station? What's happened? Is Mary Jo there with you? Well, you see, there was a car accident. I wanted to speak with your family before you heard anything from the press because Mary Jo was in the car. Miss Jo. Anything else? I am so... Gwen Kopechne stands in her kitchen and stares into space. Thoughts rush through her mind. Her only child is dead at the age of 28. Mary Jo's bright future.
I grew up myself. I needed to just reap my opportunity to tax loss over time. And then I realized I was doing all of these things that were pretty straightforward to implement. I just needed to spend my time doing them. Betterment automates the same good practices, goal-based planning in a way that makes sense and is responsible. Doing it.
Learn more. Betterment is offered TOA for all customers.
Capital Health.
From Audible Original Program, and this is American Scandal. Ted Kennedy was a uniquely fascinating figure in American politics. One of the longest-serving senators in the history of Congress, he became known as the Liberal Lion for championing hundreds of progressive causes all the way to his death in 2009 at the age of 77. But his life wasn't just defined by political service. Ted Kennedy enjoyed immense privilege, and he suffered unthinkable tragedies. Kennedy was born into a powerful and glamorous family, determined to win the highest political office in the country. But after the deaths of his three older brothers, by 1969, he was the only one left who could achieve those ambitions. Kennedy had a charming personality and a famous family name, but he was also deeply scarred by his siblings' deaths, and that trauma fed increasingly self-destructive habits, including womanizing and heavy drinking. Eventually, that reckless behavior would result in yet another tragedy. The mysterious incident on Chappaquiddick Island would leave a young woman dead and cost Ted Kennedy his shot at the White House. But though he would never be president, Kennedy would still be protected from the real consequences of what he did by his wealth, his power, and his refusal to explain what really happened on that summer night in 1969. This is episode 1, The Kennedy Curse. It's the summer of 1940 at the idyllic Kennedy family compound in Hyannis Port, a tiny beachfront village on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Take lunch. He takes a bite of his peanut butter sandwich, looks out over the Atlantic. He loves being here. The sunshine, the ocean breeze, the sound of waves lapping on the shore. But it's the Kennedys he loves most of all. Gargan is the nephew of Rose Kennedy, the matriarch of the family. His own home life isn't easy. His mother died 4 years ago, and his dad travels a lot for work, so he spends as much time as he can with his wealthy relatives. Rose and her husband Joseph have 9 children, but they seem happy to have Gargan around too. Still, Gargan is aware that he isn't actually a Kennedy, and even though he's only 10, he's figured out that being in this special place comes with a price attached. Gargan's role here is to look after Teddy, the youngest of the Kennedy children. With his siblings in their teens and 20s, 8-year-old Teddy is very much the baby of the family, a chubby kid who struggles in school and is often picked on by his accomplished older brothers, Joe Jr., John, and Bobby. So as the picnic is wrapping up, Gargan watches the older boys race to the garage to grab their bikes and head out for a ride along the beachfront. Not wanting to be left behind, Teddy follows on their heels. And that's Gargan's cue. He runs along and catches up with Teddy. When they reach the garage, Gargan sees the others are already on their 10-speeds, pushing their way out onto the driveway. Gargan picks a beat-up old bike off the ground for himself, but when he looks over at Teddy, he can see something's wrong. Teddy's bike has a flat front tire. Gargan's surprised. The tire was just fine yesterday, so he begins to wonder if one of the brothers has poked a hole in it as a joke. That would be typical of the way they treat the runt of the family. And as Teddy presses down on the mushy tire, he begins to cry softly, then looks at Gargan. Gargan can see Teddy clearly has no idea how to fix it. So as usual, it's up to Gargan to clean up the situation. He tells Teddy to grab the bike pump and the patch kit from the workbench. Then Gargan sets the bike on its side, gets down on his knees and removes the deflated tube from the rim. He runs his hand along the inside where he finds a small nail piercing the tire. He tosses the culprit aside. And when Teddy returns with a small black rubber patch, Gargan quickly applies it and wraps the tube back around the rim. Gargan then tries to show Teddy how to attach the pump to the tire's nozzle to inflate it. It's a simple enough task that his cousin really should learn for himself, but Teddy's growing impatient. He obviously just wants to catch up with his brothers. So Gargan handles the pump himself. Within a few seconds, the tire's inflated. Teddy then smiles, wipes a tear from his eye, and gives Gargan a quick hug. A few minutes later, the 2 boys are on their bikes, pedaling hard down the driveway and onto the beachfront road. Gargan takes a big breath of salty ocean air, feels the cool breeze on his face. He grins to himself. If taking care of Teddy is what it takes to stay here with his family, then it's a price worth paying. The source of the wealth and prestige Joe Gargan is so attracted to can be traced back to the early 20th century and to Joseph Kennedy Sr. The son of a successful businessman from Boston, Joe Sr. was a young man with big ambitions. After graduating from Harvard in 1912, he made his way to Wall Street. There, he proved to be a prodigy in trading stocks and commodities, and he quickly amassed a fortune of his own. In 1914, he married Rose Fitzgerald, and just over a decade later, they moved west to Hollywood. There, Joe ran a series of film studios and carried on an extramarital affair with legendary actress Gloria Swanson. Then, in the 1930s, with the repeal of Prohibition, Joe branched out into the lucrative business of importing liquor. By the mid-30s, he had become one of the richest businessmen in the United States, But by that stage, he was also a powerful figure in the Democratic Party. In 1934, President Franklin Roosevelt appointed Joe as the first head of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Then in 1938, he was given the prestigious post of ambassador to the United Kingdom. This all means that young Ted Kennedy has enjoyed a privileged life so far, though it's not always been an easy one. His father, Joe Sr., has high expectations of all his children, and the boys especially are expected to excel both academically and on the sports field. That all seems to come naturally to his older brothers, but Ted isn't the best student, and his task is made even harder by constant disruption to his school life. His father, Joe's varied career has led the family from East Coast to West and back again, and across the Atlantic to England. Ted has been dragged along in his wake, moving from school to school. A more permanent return to the United States, though, is soon in the cards. Joe Sr. has long faced criticism for suggesting that Europe should appease Adolf Hitler and the U.S. should stay out of World War II. But in late 1940, President Roosevelt steps up his public support for Great Britain, and Joe Kennedy's position as ambassador in the country becomes untenable. He resigns and returns to the United States shortly after, with his political standing permanently damaged. Joe Sr. had dreamt of becoming the first Irish Catholic president, but now he accepts it will have to be one of his sons who will achieve that goal instead. This professional setback is quickly followed by a personal one. The eldest Kennedy daughter, 23-year-old Rosemary, has had developmental problems since she was a baby. But when she begins suffering convulsions and flying into rages, Joe Sr. is advised by Rosemary's doctors that she should undergo a radical medical procedure. He agrees without consulting his wife, but the lobotomy goes wrong and causes Rosemary catastrophic brain damage. Unable to walk or speak, she's taken away to an institution and is rarely seen by her family again. It's a traumatic experience for young Ted, who is especially close to Rosemary. But losing his sister will prove to be just the first of many tragedies in Ted's life. Almost 3 years later, in August 1944, Ted is eating dinner inside the Kennedy home in Hyannisport. The whole family's there, except Rosemary, of course, and the oldest brother, Joe Jr., who is off in Europe serving as a Navy pilot in the war. As Ted digs into the butter-soaked lobster on his plate, he hears a knock at the front door, and a moment later a pair of Catholic priests is shown into the room. To Ted, there is nothing unusual about this. His parents often have clergy over for dinner and even host private masses in their home. But when Ted sees the looks on the men's faces, he starts to think this may not be the usual kind of visit. The room quiets down, and one of the priests steps up to the table and explains he has some terrible news. Earlier this afternoon, Joe Jr.'s plane exploded while flying a mission near the English coast. Joe and his co-pilot were killed. Ted's mother lets out a shriek as the priests try to comfort her. His father rises from his chair and begins pacing the room. He mutters what a waste it is. Joe Jr. was going to be president. 12-year-old Ted is in shock, not sure what to say or do. He looks over at his brother John, who's seated next to him. At 27 years old, John is now the oldest surviving Kennedy brother. And as Ted watches, Joe Sr. stops pacing and stands behind him. He puts a hand firmly on John's shoulder. He doesn't say a word, but the message is clear. It's John's turn now. Ted watches as John takes a deep breath and stands up, clears his throat, and addresses the room. John explains that Joe Jr. wouldn't want them to sit around crying. Life goes on, and Kennedys don't feel sorry for themselves. With that, John announces that the boys are all going sailing. It's what Joe Jr. would have wanted. But Ted is in a daze. He rises from the table and numbly follows John and his older brother Bobby out the door, trying to make sense of it all. First, Rosemary was taken away, and now Joe Jr. It's almost too much for Ted to comprehend. But one thing is clear. Ted has learned that when tragedy strikes, the family must keep marching forward. And when one Kennedy brother goes down, it's the next man up. So John begins to make political ambitions. In 1946, he is elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. There's some talk in the past that JFK could be president one day. But in 1948, tragedy strikes the Kennedys again. Ted's 28-year-old sister Kathleen dies in a plane crash while on vacation in France. With now 2 Kennedys dead and a third institutionalized, the public starts to whisper about the family Joker's spends his acting his focusing instead on football, worried about main needs to take his act and concert professor terrified if football team expect what he's going to hoping to Kennedy takes a breath and picks. Hello, this is Ted Kennedy. Well, you've made a hell of a mess this time. Kennedy goes pale. The voice on the line isn't his professor, it's his father. Oh, hi, Dad. I suppose you heard about the exam. Look, it's not as bad as it sounds. I can find a way to smooth it over. Oh, the hell you can. I just got off the phone with the dean. You're being expelled. This is the news Kennedy was dreading. He slumps onto the bed as his father continues laying into him. Your mother's in the next room crying her eyes out, Ted, after all she's been through these past few years. Dad, please. You know I had to pull strings and put the family name on the line just to get you in. And this is how you repay me? I'll find a way to make it right. I don't know, appeal or something. No, there's no use. They've got you dead to rights on this one. Teddy, what were you thinking? I don't know. I'm sorry. Well, I'll tell you exactly how this is going to go. You'll tell no one about what's happened and leave campus quietly next week when exams are over. Student records are sealed, so no one else needs to know what happened. Won't people wonder why I'm gone next fall? Yes, and we'll need a story for why you've left. So pack your bags, young man. You're joining the military. Military? Well, say you were inspired to follow in your brother's footsteps. You'll serve your country and keep your nose clean. Then in a few years, I'll dangle a big donation and we'll beg Robert to let you back in. You think you can handle that? Yes, sir. Good. And next time, Teddy, by God, don't get caught. Ted Kennedy does not want to be a soldier, but he doesn't have much choice. He knows his father is right. Joining up is the only way to save himself and his family from public embarrassment. Luckily, Kennedy is still a young man with plenty of time to turn things around. And if he shapes up, he can still achieve whatever he wants in life. After all, with the family name and fortune, there's nothing that can really stop a Kennedy.
Hello, I'm Matt Ford.
And I'm Alice Levine.
We're the hosts of British Scandal.
Yes, we are, and our new series starts with a loud, lovable woman from Guernsey who becomes the most
This is the story of
just by being herself.
and then lost every pieces of scandals Britain has ever seen,
It's a story of fame.
and a change of the conversation around cervical cancer forever.
Follow British Scandal wherever you get your podcasts or listen early and ad-free on Audible. There are people you're told to trust. Lawyers, teachers, especially doctors. But what happens when you put your life in someone's hands and they betray you? The hit podcast Dr. Death is back, and this season is unlike any other. Dr. Death is a story of neurosurgeon, self-persona of confidence and care. He wore cowboy boots in the operating room and became sought after by patients. He promised to heal them. Instead, he left a trail of broken bodies. This season is about a doctor who was never truly held accountable for the patients whose lives he ruined. A story of grief, betrayal, and a fight for justice that will leave you questioning who to trust. Listen to Dr. Death, the Cowboy, wherever you get your podcasts, or binge the entire series right now, only with Audible.
In 1951, Ted Kennedy ships off for the Army. The Korean War is in full swing, but Kennedy's family connections ensure he never gets close to combat. Instead, he's stationed in Europe and assigned mostly administrative tasks. Kennedy serves a little under 2 years. Then, with his father's help, he's accepted back into Harvard on academic probation. Kennedy quickly returns to the university football team, excelling so much that he's even approached by the Green Bay Packers about playing in the NFL. But he also improves at his studies, and with a B average, he has the grades to leave football behind and go on to law school at the University of Virginia. But many of the faculty members there oppose his application when they learn of his earlier cheating scandal. Still, it's hard to say no to the Kennedys, and he's eventually accepted. While he's at Virginia, Kennedy meets and marries Joan Bennett, a law student and former model. Now in his mid-20s, Kennedy finally appears to have his life on the right track, but despite being a lawyer and a married man, his reckless behavior persists. One night in 1958, Kennedy is driving his Oldsmobile convertible in Virginia when he blows through a red light. He's spotted by a police officer who tries to pull him over, but Kennedy then turns off his lights and speeds away through the darkness, hoping to evade the cop. Eventually, the officer catches up, though, and finds Kennedy's car parked in the driveway. When the cop approaches, he finds Kennedy lying down in the front seat, hiding. The officer cites him for reckless driving, racing to avoid pursuit, and driving on an expired license. But Kennedy leans on his family's lawyers to argue that his lights suffered from a malfunction. He's ultimately let off with a $35 fine. But he doesn't learn his lesson, and within the next year, Kennedy is cited multiple times for new traffic violations, including speeding, running another red light, and driving without a license. But while Ted Kennedy is getting himself in trouble in Virginia, a few miles north in Washington, D.C., his brother John is rising fast. Just as his father expected, he's launched a bid for the White House, and at the 1960 general election, he defeats sitting Vice President Richard Nixon to become the youngest man to occupy the Oval Office in the history of the United States. John names his brother Bobby as Attorney General, but there's no formal role for Ted in the new administration. Still, his brother's rise to the top opens a door for him. In 1962, at the age of just 30, Ted stands for election in JFK's old Senate seat in Massachusetts. The Harvard cheating scandal becomes an issue in the race, but he still coasts to victory on the back of his public speaking skills and, of course, his family name. So now, all three living Kennedy brothers now hold prominent positions on the national political stage. And although their father is not the force he once was after suffering a stroke, Kennedys are still by far the most influential family in the country. But privilege and power can't protect them from everything. On the afternoon of November 22nd, 1963, Ted Kennedy is in Washington, D.C., standing on the dais overlooking the floor of the U.S. Senate. It's a big day for him. He's taking part in the tradition where first-term senators preside over the chamber and direct proceedings, and he likes the feeling of power. He bangs the gavel and nods to a colleague. The senator from Missouri is recognized. You have the floor, sir. But just as Kennedy is starting to get the hang of it, he sees a pale-faced Senate clerk walking quickly down the aisle. He stops beneath the dais. "Excuse me, Senator Kennedy?" Kennedy leans over. "Yeah, what is it?" "It's about the president, sir." "What's happened?" "They're saying he's been hurt in Dallas, that he's been shot." Whispers is across the room. The other senators are hearing the same news. Kennedy steps down from the dais and grabs the clerk by the arm. "All right, come with me." Kennedy moves quickly across the Senate floor with the clerk in tow. He flings open the large double doors and strides into the lobby outside. By the far wall, dozens of people have gathered around a row of teletype machines that spit out the latest news. Kennedy tries to push his way through to get a better look. Excuse me, move aside, please." When the crowd doesn't part, Kennedy grows more frustrated. "I said move aside, damn it, it's my brother!" That gets the crowd's attention, and realizing who he is, people look to the floor and step aside. Kennedy stands over the Associated Press machine, reading the latest update. It just says he's been shot. It doesn't say whether he's alive. The clerk remains at his side, standing over an adjacent machine. Reuters says he's been taken to a hospital. Oh, damn it, someone must know something. I need to talk to Bobby. The DOJ has people in Dallas. I'll call him from my office. You stay here and come find me if there are any updates. Ted Kennedy jogs across the lobby and out into the sun. He hurries down the steps of the Capitol building, heading to his office across the street. He's already lost 2 siblings to tragic deaths, and he hopes to God he hasn't just lost a third. But when Kennedy makes it to his office, he finds the phone lines are jammed. Still in the dark about whether his brother is alive or dead, he races races home where he's finally able to get a hold of Bobby. And that's when Kennedy learns the devastating news that their brother John, the president, is dead. JFK was just 2 years into his first term and had instilled a new sense of optimism in many Americans. Now, for the future and dread, Ted feels it too acutely, and the grief is soon channeled into more reckless behavior. A year after losing his brother John in June 1964, Kennedy is campaigning for re-election to the Senate. He plans to fly to the Massachusetts State Party Convention in Springfield, along with an aide and fellow Senator Birch Bayh and Bayh's wife. But the pilot of the Kennedy family's private plane refuses to take off. The weather in Springfield is bad, he says, and it's just too dangerous to fly. But Kennedy won't take no for an answer, so he charters a different plane with another pilot for the trip. But he should have listened. In thick fog, the aircraft crashes into an orchard just 3 miles from its destination in Springfield. The pilot and Kennedy's aide are killed. The other passengers are hurt as well, but Senator Bayh manages to gather enough strength to pull Kennedy's limp body from the wreckage. The crash leaves Kennedy with broken ribs, a shattered back, and a punctured lung. He spends 5 months in the hospital, unable to campaign in person, and he even sees in election night in bed. But still, he coasts to victory with more than 70% of the vote. That same night, Ted's brother Bobby is elected to the U.S. Senate in New York. And as he sets up his new office in Washington, he recruits a team of secretaries and aides. Among them is 24-year-old Mary Jo Kopechne. As a younger woman, she was inspired to work in government by John Kennedy's iconic inauguration speech, the one that urged Americans to ask what you can do for your country. Now she's answering that call, and her tireless enthusiasm and intelligence quickly make Kopechne one of Bobby Kennedy's most trusted aides. And late one evening, in March 1968, she's summoned into her boss's office. Stepping inside, she finds RFK at his desk, with Kennedy family aide and speechwriter Ted Sorensen hovering nearby. To Kopechne, this is thrilling. Sorensen is the man who wrote the very speech that inspired her to enter government service. But if she's intimidated, she doesn't show it. Bobby asks Kopechne to take a seat at the typewriter in the corner. They need her to take some dictation. Then Bobby begins to speak, with Sorensen occasionally interrupting to offer adjustments to the language. Back and forth, Kopechne types furiously, trying to keep up. She doesn't have much chance to absorb what they're saying at first, just hoping to get their words cleanly onto the paper. But after a few paragraphs, Kopechne realizes what's happening. This isn't a letter to a colleague or another speech for the Senate floor. This is Bobby Kennedy's announcement that he's running for president. Ever since the assassination of JFK, it's been rumored that Bobby would try to take his place, and now it's really happening. Kopechne's heart beats faster. This is history, and she's right in the middle of it. The words she's typing will be remembered forever, so Kopechne tries to stay calm and focus on the task at hand. But a moment later, Sorensen grew quiet. Then to Kopechne, the man. They want to know how best to appeal to the young voters, whose turnout will be crucial in the election. Kopechne speaks from the heart. She explains that she's scared and angry seeing the boys from her hometown shipped off to fight in Vietnam. If Bobby can capture that feeling, he's sure to connect with young people. Bobby likes the sound of that and has her type out her words verbatim as a first draft. This is a surreal moment for Kopechne. She's just a 27-year-old from a humble family in New Jersey. And now she's a junior speechwriter for the next president of the United States. With the Kennedys, it seems anything is possible, and her wildest dreams might be coming true. Whether you're exploring your current fascinations or discovering new ones, Audible has all the stories that'll introduce you to your most fascinating self. Tap into a whole new world of heated conversations with a saucy romantasy series. Become your friend group's sci-fi expert on the latest blockbuster book-to-screen adaptation, or find a audiobooks and podcasts, including trending bestsellers, the hottest new releases, and exclusive podcasts you won't find anywhere else. Sign up now to become a member and get any audiobook every month, plus exclusive podcasts. Plan OnlyFans now start at $8.99. Audible. Be fascinated. Be fascinating.
I'm Leon Mayfok, best known as the co-creator of Slow Burn and Fiasco. I have, of course, heard of OnlyFans, but always with a distant and quiet skepticism, a silent judgment, you might say. Who is actually using this platform?
I am. Hi, I'm OnlyFans creator and comedian Gracie Kanan. From home. Now I'm on OnlyFans. And in case you guys don't know what OnlyFans is, ask your husband.
My journalistic curiosity got the best of me when I found out that my own sister had started an OnlyFans account.
I'm not a sister, just to clarify.
It turns out a lot of what I thought I knew about OnlyFans was wrong.
I felt like I wasted 3.5 years for something that wasn't real.
What happens when connection comes with a price tag? Listen to Only Fantasy wherever you get your podcast or binge all episodes of Fantasy.
In the spring of 1968, Robert Kennedy's run for the White House kicks into high gear. He taps his cousin Joe Gargan as campaign chairman. By this time, Gargan is far more than Ted Kennedy's childhood protector. He's been at the heart of several winning campaigns for the Kennedy family, including John's Senate and presidential victories, along with the Senate wins for Ted and Bobby. So Gargan quickly puts together a team, and at the nerve center of the campaign's Washington headquarters are the Boiler Room Girls. Named for the hot, windowless room where they work, it's a tight-knit crew of 6 led by RFK's young aide Mary Jo Kopechne. Together they collate crucial information about battleground states, opponents, and convention delegates. But they know they face an uphill battle. Kennedy's name, Bobby's campaign seems like the favorite for the Democratic nomination is the incumbent vice president. Contests of 1968, momentum seems to shift in Bobby's favor. Her victories in Indiana, Washington, D.C., and Nebraska, followed by a dramatic triumph in the winner-takes-all primary in California on June 4th. Suddenly, the prospect of another Kennedy in the White House is a real one, but the moment of celebration and hope for Bobby's supporters is all too brief. Shortly after giving his victory speech at a hotel in Los Angeles, Bobby is assassinated. His death is devastating for all the Boiler Room Girls, but especially for Kopechne. She worked closely with Bobby for years and considered him like family. Joe Gargan is also heartbroken. Bobby was not only his boss, but his cousin and his friend. But the most shaken of all is Ted Kennedy. Now, all 3 of his older brothers have died tragically young, 1 in a wartime plane crash and 2 by assassins' bullets. At Bobby's funeral, he delivers a moving eulogy saying, "My brother need not be idealized or enlarged in death beyond what he was in life, to be remembered simply as a good and decent man who saw wrong and tried to right it, saw suffering and tried to heal it, saw war and tried to stop it." But it's not just the now horribly familiar grief that Kennedy has to shoulder. Now the family's dreams of retaking the White House rest entirely on him, and it's a heavy burden. So in the days following the funeral, Joe Gargan tries to lift Ted's spirits with the Kennedy family's favorite pastime, sailing around Cape Cod. The 2 men haven't had much time alone together since Bobby's death, and Gargan is worried about Kennedy's state of mind. So he takes this opportunity out on the water for a heart-to-heart talk. "Well, Ted, sure is a beautiful day." "Yeah?" Kennedy is at the helm, one hand on the wheel, and a glass of rum and coke on the other. Gargan sits nearby. "Somehow, I think this is exactly what Bobby would have wanted. You and me out here, enjoying the ocean. Well, what Bobby wanted was to be president. Oh, we all did, for sure. How you been holding up?" "I'm trying not to feel. This helps." Kennedy lifts up his glass. "Yeah, I understand. I've seen 2 brothers shot dead, Joe, killed in their prime. Now I've got a dozen nieces and nephews without fathers. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to tell them?" "Yeah, it's unfathomable. There's this sickness in this country. Where does it end?" I wish I knew. But nobody does. You ask me how I'm holding up? Well, I feel scared. The party is already pushing me to run for president. For Christ's sakes, I'm only 36. Even if I was ready for the job, how do you think it would go? When is some madman going to take a shot at me? Well, for what it's worth, Teddy, I'll do everything in my power to stop that. I've been looking out for you since I was 10 years old. That's never going to end. Pained expression flits across Kennedy's face, and he downs his drink. What I really need from you right now is another one of these. Well, that I can do. Gargan stands up and takes the empty glass from Kennedy's hand. And as Gargan mixes a fresh rum and coke, he thinks there's been enough morbid talk for one afternoon, so directs the conversation to something light. You know, I was thinking about throwing a little get-together this summer on the vineyard. Something for Bobby's campaign staff. You know, those boiler room girls put their heart and soul into the campaign. Gargan hands the drink off to Kennedy, who lifts it in a brief toast. Well, that sounds like a great idea. I want them to know they're appreciated, you know, that they'll always have a place in the family. We'll just name the day and I'll be there. You know, I love a party. In the end, Ted Kennedy doesn't make it to the staffers' party that summer. But it's such a success that Joe Gargan decides to turn it into an annual tradition. And the next time, Kennedy makes sure he's there. The get-together is held on Martha's Vineyard on the weekend of the annual Edgartown Yacht Club Regatta. The regatta is a good-natured boat race between a few dozen well-to-do locals, and Kennedy enters the contest with his yacht Victura. And on the afternoon of Friday, July 18th, Kennedy finishes 9th in the competition. And afterward he boards the winning ship to join its team for a celebration. Kennedy puts back a number of his signature rum and cokes, and then around sundown he heads off to Chappaquiddick Island. Gargan rented a bedroom cottage there for the boiler room party. The small, sparsely populated island is separated from Edgartown by a narrow channel just a few hundred feet wide, so Kennedy and his chauffeur Jack Crimmins use a car ferry to cross. And soon after Kennedy arrives, the cottage fills with people and the party gets started. There are 12 of them in all. Kennedy, Gargan, the chauffeur Crimmins, 3 other Kennedy confidants, and the 6 boiler room girls, including Mary Jo Kopechne. For several hours, they eat, drink, and share old campaign stories. Then around 11 p.m., Gargan heads to the kitchen to make hors d'oeuvres for the partygoers. It's been a long, hot, and boozy evening. Gargan himself is laying off the drinks due to from the oven that he misses. Walks into the kitchen to grab
No need to apologize.
hotel rooms back in Edgartown, but the last ferry runs at midnight. It's time to start winding things down and head home. They don't want to be stuck here for the night with 12 people in a clammy 2-bedroom cottage. But as soon as Crimmins answers, Gargan can smell the alcohol in his breath and hear him slurring his words. He's clearly drunk and shouldn't be driving Kennedy or anyone else home tonight. So Gargan decides he ought to talk it over with Kennedy. Into the living room and calls out for him. But Kennedy's nowhere to be found. Then Crimmins speaks up, telling Gargan that Kennedy just left the cottage with Mary Jo Kopechne. Gargan sighs. It looks like Kennedy has driven himself and Kopechne to catch the last ferry home. Gargan's not exactly surprised. Over the years, he's grown used to Kennedy acting on his own whims, leaving it to Gargan to smooth things over. But now there's only one car left for the rest of them. With 10 people still at the cottage, there's no way he'll get everyone to the ferry in time. He'll have to stay the night. But as Gargan walks back to the oven, another more troubling realization hits him. He saw both Kennedy and Kopechne down a number of drinks in the last few hours. And Kennedy's a notoriously reckless driver, even when he's sober. Gargan's already lost too many people he loved to senseless tragedies. He knows he won't be able to relax until he hears from Kennedy again. So all he can do in the meantime is hope that he and Kopechne make it back to the hotel in one piece. American Scandal uses dramatizations that are based on true events. Some elements, including dialogue, might be invented, but everything is based on historical research. It's around 12:45 a.m. on Saturday, July 19th, 1969. Christopher Huck Look is behind the wheel of his car on Chappaquiddick, a small island off Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. Look is a part-time deputy sheriff, and tonight he's been working security at a regatta party in Edgartown. He rubs his eyes, stifles a yawn, but as he nears his next turn, Look is jolted alert by the headlights of a car rapidly approaching. Look slows down and pulls off slightly to let the other driver pass. And as the car flashes by in front of his headlights, Look can see it's a black Oldsmobile with a man and a woman in the front seats. They pull off the main road and onto a private dirt lane where the car stops. Figuring the driver's a tourist in need of directions, Look gets out of his car. When he gets to within 30 feet of the Oldsmobile, he calls out, "Hey, evening, folks. Anything I can help you with?" The car suddenly shifts into drive and then speeds off, kicking up a cloud of dirt. As a deputy sheriff, Look intuitively narrows his eyes on the license plate. It's dark, but in the red glow of the taillights, he can see it's a Massachusetts plate that begins with L7. Then, with a shake of his head, Look goes back to his car. And as he drives off, it occurs to him that he's still wearing his police badge. The pair in the Oldsmobile had probably been drinking and got spooked when they saw a cop. But Look hasn't gone too much further when he spots some more people. A man and two women dancing in a clumsy conga line in the middle of the road. Look slows down and leans his head out the window. "Hey, you folks doing all right? Need a lift?" One of the women responds without even looking at him. "Hey, shove off, buddy. We're fine." "Excuse me?" The woman turns toward Look, and when she notices the badge, her tone changes. "Oh, officer, sorry. Hello, what'd you say?" "I said, do you need a lift?" "Oh, no thank you, sir. We're headed home. We rented a cottage just down the road." "Well, I suggest you stop dancing in the middle of the road. I almost got sideswiped a minute ago. It's regatta weekend.
34713.
I've been partying out here." "All right, yes, sir. We'll do that." "Okay. Well, you have a safe night."
34.
Look pulls away and watches as the of the road. He swears under his breath. "This damn regatta. Tourists get crazier every year." But as Deputy Huck Look continues home, his mind drifts back to the Oldsmobile. He wonders where the couple could have been going. Chappaquiddick is a tiny island with no bars, restaurants, or stores. Even the ferry to Edgartown closed at midnight. And wherever they were going, they seemed to be in a hurry. Look just hopes they got there okay.
This message comes from Betterment. Dan Egan, VP of Behavioral Finance and Investing, explains how Betterment's Tax Impact Preview tool can help you make smarter investment decisions.
Tax Impact Preview is a preview of what taxes you would owe if you sold out of a position today. Often, when individuals are investing, there's a disconnect between when they sell something and when they pay the taxes on it. You might sell it in February and the IRS comes calling in April. What we wanted to do was make people aware of the consequences of their decisions before they made them. People might forget that short-term capital gains are taxed at a higher rate than long-term capital gains. We wanted to make that information salient and give it to them at the point in time so they can make more informed decisions before they go through with them.
Learn more about Tax Impact Preview and all the other helpful investment tools at Betterment.com. The Tax Impact Preview tool provides an estimate of tax implications. Betterment does not provide tax advice. Investing involves risk. Performance not guaranteed.
Here it is. This corner kick could be a big one. There's the cross. He rises to meet it, and it's a car! Soccer's biggest tournament is here, and Enterprise is turning every corner kick goal into your chance to win a car. The moment a corner kick is called, post on X with hashtag #OnEveryCorner, hashtag sweepstakes, and tag Enterprise. If it's a corner kick goal, you could win. Winners may pick up their cars at an Enterprise or an Enterprise car sales location on a corner near them. With over 1,000 corner kicks expected, that's a lot of chances to win. For more details and an additional chance to win, visit OnEveryCorner.com. No purchase necessary for legal residents of the 50 U.S. states and D.C., Puerto Rico, Canada, Ireland, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Spain who are 21 and older. Sweepstakes ends July 19th, 2026. Void where prohibited. Prize awarded if a corner kick goal is scored. For entry details and official rules, visit OnEveryCorner.com.
From Audible Originals, I'm Lindsey Graham, and this is American Scandal. In 1969, Ted Kennedy was only 37 years old, but he'd already been through enough ups and downs for several lifetimes. As the youngest child of a wealthy and powerful dynasty, Kennedy had been bailed out of a cheating scandal at Harvard, gotten away with multiple instances of reckless driving, and still managed to be elected to the U.S. Senate. But while his life had been privileged, it had also been enormously tragic. Of his 8 siblings, 1 had been institutionalized and 4 had been killed, including his older brothers John and Bobby, who were both assassinated. Many assumed that Kennedy would take up their mantle and run for president one day too, but the trauma of losing his siblings had left him scarred, frightened, and more susceptible to his bad habits than ever. In July of 1969, Kennedy's cousin and lifelong protector Joe Gargan threw a party at a cottage on Chappaquiddick Island. Joining them were 6 young women from Bobby Kennedy's ill-fated presidential campaign, along with a handful of other men from the Kennedy political machine. But thanks to Ted Kennedy's demons, what was supposed to be a happy weekend get-together would soon turn into yet another tragedy. This is episode 2, The Bridge. It's around 1:15 a.m. on Saturday, July 19th, 1969, on Chappaquiddick Island. In the kitchen of the small cottage he's rented, Joe Gargan scrapes leftovers off a plate and into the trash. The party's finally beginning to wind down, and he's getting sleepy. Looks like it's going to be a rough night, though. It's been about 2 hours since Ted Kennedy and 28-year-old campaign aide Mary Jo Kopechne took off in Kennedy's Oldsmobile. Gargan assumes they caught the last ferry back to their hotel rooms across the channel in Edgartown. So now, Gargan and the 9 remaining partygoers are stranded in the 2-bedroom cottage. Gargan does the math on how many beds and couches are available, and if he's lucky, he'll be able to sleep in the Lazy Boy, but equally likely, he'll be making do on the living room floor. As Gargan continues to tidy up, he feels a hand on his shoulder and turns to see Ray LaRosa, another party guest and longtime aide of Senator Kennedy. In a hushed voice, LaRosa tells Gargan that Kennedy is outside and wants to speak with him. Gargan is surprised. He thought Kennedy had left for the night. Eager to know what's going on, Gargan quickly follows LaRosa out the back door. And he finds Kennedy slumped in the back seat of a Plymouth Valiant sedan, the other car that was used to bring guests to the party. Gargan frowns in confusion. There's no sign of the Oldsmobile or Kopechne. But before he can ask Kennedy anything, he's joined by another aide, Paul Markham. LaRosa heads back inside, while Gargan and Markham climb into the car with Kennedy. Now it's just the 3 of them. Kennedy explains what's happened. He says there's been an accident. The senator was driving with Kopechne when his car went off a bridge down by the beach, about a mile from the cottage. His voice is strangely calm and matter-of-fact, but then the story gets worse. Kennedy tells them that the Oldsmobile is in the water and Kopechne is still inside. Shock washes over Gargan. For a moment, he's frozen in his seat, thinking this can't be happening. But then Gargan pulls himself together. It's possible Kopechne is still alive, which means they need to get to the crash site. Gargan turns the key in the ignition and guns the Valiant onto the road. Seconds later, they're at an intersection. The main road curves around to the left, and to the right is a narrow private dirt lane that leads to the beach. Gargan yells out to Kennedy, asking which way to go, and from the back seat, Kennedy tells Gargan to turn right. A lot of the roads on Chappaquiddick are little more than dirt tracks, but this one is especially treacherous. About a half-mile from the intersection, it veers sharply to the left, then immediately crosses an old wooden bridge that spans a channel linking the sea with an island pond. The bridge itself is even narrower than the road, just wide enough for a single car, and there are no guardrails. Gargan slows as the bridge comes into view, and Kennedy tells him this is where he crashed. Carefully, Gargan drives across the bridge. Then on the other side, he turns back around and shines the sedan's headlights over the channel. Gargan gets out of the car and hurries over to the water's edge. Markham joins him while Kennedy takes a seat on the hood of the parked Valiant and just stares silently into space. Gargan peers into the dark water. He sees the Oldsmobile flipped upside down and almost completely submerged. He turns to Markham. Jesus. How long has it been since the crash? Must have been half an hour. If Mary Jo's in there, there's no way anyone can survive, right? Well, we're gonna try. Gargan heads toward the bridge and Markham follows. As they walk, Gargan starts unbuttoning his shirt. Yeah, we should probably take our clothes off. We don't want anything catching on a door handle or a broken window or something. Yeah, good idea. The two men strip down, and a moment later, they're both standing on the bridge, completely nude. Markham dives into the pond first, followed by Gargan. He's relieved to find the water isn't too cold, but as he surfaces and kicks out toward the car, he can feel the tug of the current pulling at it. He swims harder, and a few seconds later, both men have reached the rear of the submerged car. Catching his breath, Gargan lays out a plan. All right, I don't think we'll be able to see anything down there. I'm just going to feel around the car with my legs, try and find an open window that we can get inside of. But after a moment of kicking around, Gargan can tell this isn't going to work. I can't feel anything. I need to go under. Okay, but be careful. Gargan lets go of the car and submerges fully underwater, but he still can't find a way in. He pops back up. This isn't working. I'm going to try the front. Gargan swims to the front of the overturned car and feels around the vehicle with his legs. Hey, there's an opening here. It must be a window. I'm going to try and get inside. Just make sure you can get back out. Gargan takes a deep breath and dives under the surface. Grabbing the sides of the window, he pulls his body through the opening. He claws around the inside with his hands, and he can't make sense of what he's groping at. When Gargan begins to lose his breath, he tries to go back the way he came, but suddenly he can't find the window. He thrashes out, grasping for anything. Finally, his hands catch on a hard surface, and he pushes off. Stretching out for the open window, Gargan forces himself back through. Joe, you okay? The current threatens to pull Gargan downstream, but Markham grabs a hold of him and drags him back to the car. Holding on to the submerged trunk, Gargan tries to gather his strength. I couldn't see anything. I got turned around and started panicking. You're okay. You're okay. That's the main thing. You're okay. I already lost you for a second, though. I'm going back in. Oh, no, it's too dangerous. I'll stay outside of the car. Maybe I can get one of the doors open. No, Joe, I have to try home. I'm the one who invited her. But even though he tries, Joe Gargan can't force a door open, and eventually the two men decide they're only risking their own lives. They swim to the low-slung bridge and pull themselves up onto its wooden beams. Then, exhausted, they trudge over to the Valiant, where Ted Kennedy remains seated on the hood. They tell him they've done all they can. Kennedy is distraught. He puts his hands on his head, and over he mutters, "I can't believe this is happening." Gargan and Markham begin putting their clothes back on. And as they dress, they ask Kennedy again what happened. Kennedy can't tell them much more than he already has. He says he was driving his Oldsmobile on the dirt road when he suddenly found himself on the bridge. Then, in an instant, the car was off the bridge and upside down in the pond. Kennedy thought he was going to drown, but he somehow freed himself from the car and made it to shore. He went back for Kopechne, but couldn't save her. So he did the only thing he could think of and walked back to the cottage to get help. There's a long silence. No one is sure what to say or do. So Gargan gets behind the wheel of the Valiant with Markham in the passenger seat and Kennedy in the back. As he starts the car up and carefully crosses the bridge again, Gargan begins to think. As Kennedy's lifelong protector, it's up to him to ensure that this already nightmarish situation doesn't get any worse. There's a dead girl behind when the accident happened. They clearly need to report it as soon as possible, and not just because it's a legal requirement. Failing to alert the authorities in a timely manner will expose Kennedy to all manner of legal and political trouble further down the line. So Gargan begins laying out a plan. When they get back to Edgartown, they'll head to the police station to report the accident in person. After that, they should call Kennedy's mother, Rose, to let the family know what's happened before they hear about it from the media. Sounds like a good course of action. Kennedy, he's got a different idea. Kennedy cottage and work out a story they can stick with. Then he'll go back to his hotel in Edgartown alone, allowing Gargan to go to the crash site and discover the accident for himself. Claim he found Kopechne alone in the car, making it appear Kopechne crashed herself into the pond. Kennedy was asleep miles away. Gargan is horrified. Full of holes. First of all, he and Markham already know what happened. They're not going to implicate themselves in crime by lying to the police. And even if they did, saw Kennedy leave with Kopechne. There's no way 5 other boiler to lie about at night behind the wheel of a car that wasn't hers, partying at the cottage. They don't even know if Kopechne had a license. It's all too risky. Kennedy tries to argue back, insisting that those are minor details that can be worked out. But Gargan cuts him off, raising his voice. Gargan reminds Kennedy that the three of them were being quite loud at the crash site just now, well within earshot of nearby homes. They also had the Valiant's headlights shining over the pond, which anyone passing by would have seen. There could be witnesses they don't even know about. Kennedy goes quiet. Gargan hopes his old senses and is ready to take responsibility for what happened. When Gargan reaches the next intersection, he continues straight toward the ferry landing, in the opposite direction of the cottage. Kennedy doesn't protest. As far as Gargan is concerned, it's an unspoken agreement. They're going to report the accident just as it happened.
Being a hard work, patience, and a drive to keep moving forward. So it's important to have a serious business card. With the Venture X business card from Capital One, you earn unlimited double miles on every purchase. With big purchasing power, earn more. This is your sign to take your business. Venture X business card. What's in your CapitalOne.com?
We're constantly grappling with the fundamental. Do we set the world as is, or do we strive to create a world as it should flow through the decades? But once, just after a war that nearly tore us apart, we came as close as we've come to answering it. And it's a story worth a closer look. I'm Michelle Obama, and I'm proud to announce Higher Ground's new podcast, Reconstruction, The Unfinished Promise. Guided by best-selling author Malcolm Gladwell and featuring my husband, Barack Obama, this limited series uncovers the untold stories of Reconstruction, what they mean for us today, and how our past can shape the future we choose to build. Reconstruction, The Unfinished Promise, is available now on Audible or wherever you get your podcasts.
It's just before 2 a.m. on July 19, 1969. Joe Gargan, Paul Markham, and Ted Kennedy reach the ferry landing on Chappaquiddick Island. Gargan's plan is for them to find a way across the channel to Edgartown so that they can report the car accident at the police station as soon as possible. He was hoping that by some miracle, the ferry might still be running at this late hour, or that there might be someone here who could help. But as he looks around, the ferrymaster is nowhere to be seen. The ferry itself is tied up across the water on the Edgartown side. The entire landing is quiet and deserted. As the three men sit in the car, Gargan once again insists that they need to find a way to get to the police station. Slumped on the back seat, Kennedy just closes his eyes. He's had enough of Gargan's voice for one night. He desperately needs a moment to himself to try and process what's just happened. It's all so surreal. He can see his political life flashing before his eyes and can't imagine how he'll possibly explain to the public that he was out with a young woman late at night while his wife was asleep at home. Even worse, now that young woman is dead. But it's hard to think straight with Gargan going on and on from the front seat. Eventually, Kennedy can't take it anymore. He just wants to get away from his cousin, away from the island, away from everything. So Kennedy interrupts Gargan and tells him and Markin to go back to the cottage without him. He says they shouldn't tell the other parties anything about the accident. Kopechne's friends might go to the bridge and hurt themselves trying to pull her body from the water. Kennedy then says he'll take care of everything. Gargan doesn't need to call the police or anyone else tonight. He'll handle all of it. And with that, Kennedy opens the door and strides away from the car. His friends don't follow. For a moment, Kennedy stands at the water's edge and stares across the channel. He can see Edgartown just 500 feet away. Kennedy wants nothing more than to get back to the safety and comfort of his hotel room, so he dives headfirst into the water, fully clothed. If Gargan or Markham shout after him or try to call him back, he doesn't hear them. And the water feels good. The shock of the cold on his body is exactly what he needs. He takes long, confident strokes, and at first the swim is smooth. Kennedy is an accomplished athlete and a lifelong swimmer, but after a while he begins to lose steam. His head is pounding and his back aches from the accident. He's also got a belly full of booze and hors d'oeuvres from a long night of partying. Now, halfway across the channel, the current begins to get stronger. Kennedy feels himself being pulled along, out toward the deeper waters of the bay. He doesn't think he can make it across, but now it's too late to turn around. A terrible thought creeps into his mind. The Kennedy curse is real, and it's about to strike again. This might be how the great finally ends. His brother Joe Jr. was killed in the war, and Jack and Bobby were struck down by a... The last Kennedy man standing is going to drown on Martha's Vineyard, swim in the middle of the night, fleeing the scene of an accident. But Kennedy pushes this thought from his head. He's too proud to give up, and a Kennedy always fights to the very end. So he kicks harder, his lungs burning. But despite all his efforts, the opposite shore still seems so far away, until he hits a calmer stretch of water. The current eases, and with each stroke of his arms, closer. When Kennedy finally reaches solid ground, he collapses on the sand, exhausted. He's relieved just to be alive, but he's also glad to be Gargan, Markham, and the whole mess he's left behind on Chappaquiddick. And when his strength returns, Kennedy picks himself up and begins trudging along the beach toward his hotel. He just needs to lie down for a while in the peace and quiet of his room to decide what to do next. Back on Chappaquiddick, Joe Gargan and Paul Markham have headed back to the cottage as instructed. They were astonished when Kennedy suddenly jumped into the water, fully clothed, but they could do nothing except watch as he struggled across the channel to Edgartown. Only after he made it across did they follow his orders, so now they're back at the party with the others. When the rest of the girls quiz Gargan on the whereabouts of Kennedy and Mary Jo Kopechne, Gargan mixes truth with lies. He correctly explains that Kennedy swam back to Edgartown, but Gargan tells the women that Kopechne drove Kennedy's Oldsmobile to catch the last car ferry of the night, and she must be safely back at her hotel by now. In reality, he knows that the Oldsmobile is only a mile away, submerged upside down in the water, with Kopechne's corpse trapped inside. But none of the others seem to suspect that Gargan is lying. Steadily, everyone finds a bed, a couch, or a space on the floor where they can lay their heads. It's an uncomfortable night for all the partygoers, but especially Gargan and Markham. Neither man sleeps, and as the hours tick by, their anxieties grow. Around 7 a.m., they hold a whispered conference. Kennedy should have reported the who surely would have come knocking at the cottage. So they decide to take the ferry to Edgartown to find out what's going on. It's around 30 minutes later when Gargan and Markham arrive at Kennedy's hotel. They see Kennedy is already up and standing on the second-floor balcony, casually talking with other guests. This sight infuriates Gargan. He's disheveled and exhausted from spending a long, anxious night in the stifling cottage. He's lied for Kennedy. He's nearly drowned for him. But now, here Kennedy is looking well-rested and cheerful, chatting with other guests like nothing's happened. Gargan calls up and interrupts the conversation. In a terse voice, he demands that they talk with Kennedy immediately. Forcing a smile, Kennedy excuses himself and disappears into the hotel. Gargan and Markham march inside and up to Kennedy's room. When Gargan pushes the door open, he finds the senator calmly lying on the bed, hands clasped behind his head. All right, what the hell, Ted? Why didn't the police come to the cottage? I guess they haven't heard about the crash. Gargan glances at Markham. I can't believe it. You told us last night you were going to take care of it. It's taking you this long to realize I didn't report it? Come on, Joe, you're supposed to be a smart guy. I figured after an hour you'd guess and just do what we talked about. What was that? Lie to the police? Do the smart thing. Tell them you discovered the crash on your own, and then Mary Jo had driven herself into the water alone. That plan wasn't smart, it was insane. It could have worked. No, it couldn't. Which is what I was trying to explain to you last night before you jumped in the water and swam away like a lunatic. So you're not going to help me? Of course I'm going to help you. You were always able to smooth things over for my brothers. This is different. There's a dead girl in the water back there inside a car registered in your name. I can't just smooth this over. You have to report it. Kennedy stares at him sullenly. Gargan points outside. Look, it's morning, Ted. People are moving around on the island. Someone's going to find the car and report it. Every minute we sit here doing nothing, the worse it will look for you. Fine. If you're not going to do it, then I guess I'll have to. I'm still going to say Mary Jo was driving. But you already told us you were driving. Paul and I, we're not going to lie about that. We could lose our law licenses. Look, whatever happened with you and Mary Jo before, still Gargan knows they're not. Chance someone police finally be doing the thing.
I'm Leon. As the co silent using.
Hi, I'm OnlyFans creator and comedian Gracie Kanan. I work from home on OnlyFans.
I'm Leon Mayfok, best known as the co-creator of Slow Burn and of course this quiet, a silent judgment, you might say. Who is actually using this platform?
I am. Hi, I'm OnlyFans creator and comedian Gracie Kanan. I work from home. Now I'm on OnlyFans. And in case you guys don't know what OnlyFans is, ask your husband.
My journalistic curiosity got the best of me when I found out that my own sister had started an OnlyFans account.
I'm not his sister, just to clarify.
It turns out a lot of what I thought I knew about OnlyFans was wrong.
I felt like I wasted 3.5 years for
Happens when connection comes with a price tag. Listen to Only Fantasy wherever you get your podcasts, or binge all episodes of Only Fantasy ad-free right now, only on Audible. Start your Audible subscription in the Audible app or on Apple Podcasts.
And has finally convinced his cousin Ted Kennedy to report the fatal car accident on Chappaquiddick Island. But before he goes to the police, Kennedy wants to call his senior aide David Berg to prepare him for the political fallout that is sure to follow. So they all exit Kennedy's hotel room and go in search of a payphone. But everywhere in Edgartown is packed with people in town for the weekend's regatta, and they can't find a phone without a line of people beside it. Eventually, the trio decide to take the car ferry back across the water to Chappaquiddick, which they hope will be quieter. And after they cross, they find no one on the pay, so Kennedy Berg from there. But he Bergen decides not to go with you. He's not convinced he'll tell the truth about what happened in the fatal accident and doesn't want to be a party to filing a false police report. Instead, Gargan drives toward the cottage. He wants to clean up the liquor bottles or any other signs of a raucous late-night party before the police come knocking. And when Gargan arrives at the cottage, he finds the 5 surviving boiler room girls are awake. This is when he admits that what he told them the night before wasn't true. But he still doesn't tell them the whole truth. He tells the women that Kennedy was in an accident last night and that their friend Mary Jo Kopechne is missing. In reality, he knows Kopechne has been dead for hours, but Gargan isn't sure exactly what Kennedy is planning. He doesn't do anything he's for. Gargan's focus is on cleaning the cottage and then getting the women out of town as fast as possible. The last thing he or Kennedy needs is for the boiler room girls to start talking with police or with the inevitable swarm of press about their missing friend. But time is already running out because Gargan and the partygoers up on the island Saturday. Robert Samuel is a 22-year-old junior high science teacher who's come to Martha's Vineyard for the weekend with his 15-year-old family friend Joe Caparella. They arrived on the island yesterday for a camping trip and have ventured out early to do some fishing. From the beachy shore, Samuel cocks his fishing rod behind his shoulder, then whips it forward, casting his line out into the water. But as he waits for a bite, Samuel begins to grow frustrated. They've been out here for an hour. Samuel gives up. He tells Caparella that it might be time to try their luck somewhere else. Soon, the young duo reel in their lines, pick inland. A few minutes later, they reach Samuel's blue Ford pickup truck. The vehicle is parked next to a narrow wooden bridge. So Samuel lifts his rod back out of the truck and beckons for Caparella to follow him to the bridge. But as they approach, something in the water catches Samuel's eye, reflecting sunlight near the surface. When he sees that it's a car, turned upside down and almost entirely submerged in the water. For a moment, Samuel wonders why they didn't see it when they passed over the bridge an hour earlier. Then he realizes it's only just become visible because the tide has started to go out. Samuel scans the area for anyone who might help, but there's no one else around. Then Caparella points out a two-story house a few hundred feet away. The pair toss their fishing rods aside. When they reach the house, Samuel bangs on the door. After a moment, the two young men are greeted by Sylvia Malm, a middle-aged woman renting the house for the summer with her family. When she hears what Samuel and Caparella have to say, Malm promptly calls the police station in Edgartown. And it doesn't take long for Police Chief Dominic Arena to arrive at the scene. He meets up with Samuel and Caparella, who point out the car in the water. And as the tide continues to flow out into the bay, its rear tires are now clearly visible. Chief Arena takes a moment to examine the dusty, sandy bridge, looking for any clues about how the car ended up in the water. He finds some light scuff marks and determines the car likely slid sideways off the bridge. As Arena begins to wrap his head around the scene, Sylvia Malm joins the men on the bridge. She says she heard a car driving on the road around midnight the night before, but she didn't hear anything plunge into the water. Chief Arena decides he needs a closer look at the wreck. He borrows a bathing suit from Malm's husband and then wades out into the channel. The water is only 6 feet deep now, but the tide is still strong, and when Arena dives underwater to get a better look at the car, he is instantly swept away. Arena lets himself drift for a moment, then catches hold of the bridge. He takes a breath and regathers himself to make another attempt, swimming hard back toward the car. But once again, it's no use. The current is just too strong, too murky to get a good to call for reinforcements. From his police cruiser, Arena radios for a tow truck and for the fire department to send a scuba diver to assist. While he waits for them to arrive, Arena swims back to the car. The police chief pushes himself up against the exposed bumper, taking a seat on the rear of the vehicle and dangling his feet into the water. Now, to himself, he got to as he the car beneath, he has a survived, should have drunk, talking to. They would have had plenty of time to sleep it off. Yet still, no one's called it in, which means whoever drove this car into the water is probably still inside. As Arena digests this thought, he spots two vehicles driving down the road toward the bridge. They park near the shore, and one of Arena's colleagues gets out of the first car. Calling to him from the water, Arena instructs him to run the submerged car's license plate. And while the officer is doing that, Arena sees John Farrar get out of the second car. Farrar is a scuba diver with the fire department, and he's arrived already in his wetsuit. As he gets his tank and other equipment out of the trunk, Arena's colleague on shore yells out that he's got the registration of the car. It belongs to Edward Moore Kennedy, better known as Senator Ted Kennedy. Before Arena can begin to process that, there's a splash. Scuba diver John Farrar dives into the water, and in a few powerful strokes, he swims out to Arena. Hey, John, thanks for getting here so quick. Sure thing. You really think we got a Kennedy down there? God, I hope not. That poor family. Yeah. Well, we should probably find out for sure. Farrar attaches a safety rope to his gear and hands the other end of the line to Arena. Hold on to this. If something goes wrong, pull me up. All right, copy that. And good luck down there.
Farrar disappears under the water, leaving Irina to wait nervously on top of the car.
He can feel vibrations below as Farrar bangs around inside the vehicle. He must have found something. It's an agonizing wait. But then Irina feels a pair of quick tugs on the safety line. He knows the signal. Farrar is letting him know he's coming up. Irina pulls the rope toward him, keeping it taut. And he sees Farrar come to the surface with a stiff, pale body in his arms. Irina can't make out who it is, but it's obviously not Ted Kennedy. Who is it? I can't tell. Some girl. Help me prop her up against the car. Irina and Farrar work together to drag the body into Irina's lap face up. Now the police chief finally gets a good look at the deceased. It's a young woman in a long white blouse. You recognize her? No? Could it be one of his sisters? They must be all in their 40s at least. She's much too young. But God, is it awful I'm relieved it's not him? I feel terrible even saying that. Well, I know what you mean, but it's still someone's daughter. Yeah, well, they probably have no idea what's happened to her. All right, let's get her out of the water. Police Chief Irina calls out to the bridge, instructing the other officer to push a small boat toward them so they can transport the woman's body to shore. As Irina waits for the boat, he thinks the thing he can do is get a hold of Senator Kennedy. He has to break the news that they just pulled a young woman from his car, and that won't be pleasant. But with any luck, Kennedy will be able to shed some light on who she is and how she ended up in the water. American Scandal uses dramatizations that are based on true events. Some elements, including dialogue, might be invented, but everything is based on historical research. Around 9:30 a.m. on July 19, 1969, on Chappaquiddick Island in Massachusetts. Local police chief Dominic Arena and fire department scuba diver John Farrar stumble up the sandy shore carrying a stretcher. On it lies the body of a young woman. Just over an hour ago, a pair of fishermen reported that they found a car upside down in the water near the beach. When Chief Arena ran the Oldsmobile's license plate, he was shocked to learn it was registered to Senator Ted Kennedy. But an even more disturbing discovery awaited inside the car. The dead woman on the stretcher was in her 20s. Dressed in a sodden white blouse and navy blue slacks, her body shows almost no signs of visible injury, which is unusual for someone who's just been in a car accident. But Chief Arena is still in the dark about the woman's identity, and he doesn't know if Senator Kennedy is even aware of the crash. Arena nods toward his deputy's police cruiser. So let's put her in the backseat for now. We don't need people standing around gawking. Arena signals another officer to open the cruiser's rear door. Then he and Farrar slide the stretcher onto the backseat. All right, now we just need to figure out who this poor girl is. Well, I'll see if there's anything left in the car. Maybe there's an ID floating around somewhere. That'd be good. Thanks, John. Farrar walks back toward the water and wades in. Arena turns to his fellow officer with some orders. Would you call the medical examiner and the undertaker too? Then we need to get a tow truck out here to pull the car from the water. The officer nods and hops in the front seat to use the radio. And while he's making these calls, Arena turns to a local man who's wandered over to watch. Hey, sir, could you do me a favor? I'm a little short-handed here, and I need someone to head down to the ferry landing to meet with the medical examiner. His name's Dr. Mills. He's an older guy with horn-rimmed glasses. You really can't miss him. The helpful local quickly agrees, and with wheels in motion, Arena returns his attention to the body in the back seat. She looks like a lovely young woman who's just laying down for a nap. Ah, what a waste. What were you doing in that car, kid?
Got something, Chief?
Arena turns to see Farrar standing in the shallows. He's holding a floral-patterned hard-shell bag. Arena hurries down the slope to take it. Water gushes out as Arena opens the bag. Rooting around inside, he pulls out a driver's license. Rosemary Keogh. All right. And this is what looks to be a pass for the U.S. Senate. Also for Miss Keogh. Okay, well, must be her, right? Maybe she worked for Senator Kennedy. You think he let her borrow the car for the weekend or something? Well, that's possible, but we won't know for sure until we talk to him. 2 keys for a hotel over in Edgartown here, too. So for now, why don't you head back in the water, make absolutely sure Keogh was the only person in the car. There could be another body in the water we haven't found yet, so focus your search downstream. That current's pretty strong. As Chief Arena watches the scuba diver once again disappear into the water, he hears a tow truck driver pull up and park just beside him. Arena walks over to the truck and begins chatting with the driver about how to pull the car safely from the water. In passing, Arena mentions that the Oldsmobile belongs to Senator Ted Kennedy, and to the chief's surprise, the driver explains that he just saw Kennedy over by the ferry landing. At once, Arena hurries over to his cruiser and gets on the radio. He needs an officer at that ferry landing right away, because he has some bad news for Senator Kennedy.
With the Venturex business card from Capital One, you earn unlimited double miles on every purchase. Plus, big purchasing power means you can spend more and earn more. The Capital One Venturex business card. Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.
Whether you're exploring your fascinations or discovering new ones, Audible has stories that will introduce you to your most fascinating self. Tap into a whole new world of heated conversations with a saucy romantasy series. Know how true the latest blockbuster movie stayed to the sci-fi story it was based on, or find unexpected reveals through an exclusive true crime podcast. However you listen, Audible keeps you fascinated so you can be just as fascinating. Select any audiobook every month, plus exclusive podcasts. Plans now start at $8.99. Audible. Be fascinated. Be fascinating. From Audible Originals, I'm Lindsey Graham, and this is American Scandal. In July 1969, Senator Ted Kennedy attended a party at a small cottage on Chappaquiddick Island in Massachusetts. Sometime after 11 p.m., he left the cottage in his car with 28-year-old Mary Jo Kopechne. Later, he moved the car off a nearby bridge and landed upside down in a stretch of water close to the beach. Kennedy apparently escaped the wreck with minimal injuries, but Kopechne was killed. Ted Kennedy should have reported the crash immediately, but instead he tried to rope in his cousin Joe Gargan and their associate Paul Markham into coordinating a false story that would absolve the senator of any responsibility. Gargan and Markham refused to go along, though, and the following morning they finally convinced Kennedy to go to the police. But the crash was discovered before Kennedy could report it, and now his political and legal problems are threatening to go from bad to worse. Dominic Arena calls the station to report that Ted Kennedy was just seen in the area. He's shocked to learn that he's already in the office. Arena asks to speak with him, and in a brief phone conversation, Kennedy explains that he's aware his car was involved in an accident, but volunteers little other information. Arena tells Kennedy to stay put, speeds off to speak with him in person. Not wanting to lose any time, Arena doesn't even change out of his bathing suit. He's still dripping wet when he arrives at the Edgartown police station. Outside, he spots 2 local reporters hovering near. That's unusual for a Saturday morning, so word about the crash must be spreading. Chief Arena hurries inside, and when he reaches his office, he finds Kennedy and another man taking the liberty of using his office phone. Good morning, Senator Kennedy. I'm Chief of Police Dominic Arena. Kennedy quickly ends his conversation. Ooh, sorry, gotta go. I'll call you back. Kennedy hangs up the phone and rises from the chair. Chief, it's a pleasure. This is my friend Paul Markham. He nods to the man beside him. Arena recognizes Markham instantly. Paul and I, we crossed paths before. He was the U.S. attorney in Boston, and I was just a state trooper. Oh, good. Then we're all friends here then, right? So, Senator, I understand you're aware there was an accident involving your vehicle? Yeah, I am. I was driving the car when it crashed. Arena wasn't expecting this. Oh, I see. I didn't know that. Well, first things first, I'm afraid we've recovered a body from the wreckage. A young woman we believe to be Rosemary Keogh. We'll need to inform her family. Oh, no, that's not Rosemary. The woman is Mary Jo Kopechne. I've already spoken with her mother. Kopechne, how do you spell that? I'm not actually sure. I'll have someone check on it for you, but do you have a strategy for dealing with the press? The press? Arena is frazzled. Here's Kennedy, well-dressed and in control, while Arena is stuttering through his words in a wet bathing suit. Kennedy puts a calming hand on his shoulder. Yeah, I mean, look, once reporters hear about this accident, they're going to descend on this place like locusts. I imagine I'm a little more used to that kind of thing than you are, so it helps to think things through beforehand. Well, I saw 2 reporters outside already. Did you talk to them? No. Well, good man. Best not to say anything just yet. You'll need a statement from me, I guess? Yeah, of course. Can we do that now? Well, if it's okay with you, I'd like to write it out. Avoid missing any details. That'll work? Sure, absolutely. I'll just need somewhere to write it. I assume you want your office back. Well, yeah, thanks. But there's an empty accounting office down the hall. No one's going to bother you there, so just take your time. All right, splendid. And don't feel obligated to wait around. I'm sure you have plenty to do. For Police Chief Dominic Arena, what started out as a routine traffic investigation has suddenly become something else entirely. The type of case it's impossible to prepare for. As feeling, he heads back to Quiddick. And while Arena is en route, medical examinations arise over Kopechne, which is still laid out on a stretcher in the back of a police cruiser. At first blush, all the evidence is consistent with death by drowning. With his initial examination complete, he has to decide whether or not to request an autopsy, but this is a tricky question. Usually in the case of a car accident, there would be no need, but as this crash involves a U.S. senator, there's sure to be more scrutiny. He can imagine being criticized no matter what choice he makes, so he decides not to make the call himself. He'll leave it to the district attorney's office to make the decision. And while Mills is with the body, Chief Arena arrives back on the scene. By now, volunteer Deputy Huck Look has shown up. He's turning any traffic away from the bridge and keeping the public at a safe distance. And when he sees Arena, he tells him what he saw the night before. Look explains that around 12:45 a.m., he saw an Oldsmobile just down the road from the crash site. There was a man driving with a woman in the passenger seat. They seemed to be lost, but when Look approached, the driver suddenly sped off. In the darkness, though, Look was able to catch a glimpse of the license plate. It began with L7, which are the first 2 digits of the car in the water behind them. Chief Arena nods his thanks. That'll be useful for establishing a timeline. Then he walks onto the bridge. Scuba diver John Farrar is still in the water. Out that he already knows who was in the car. And when the tide is at its lowest, the Oldsmobile is then hauled out. Her head had been pressed against the floorboard of the upside-down vehicle. That would have been precisely the area that filled with water last. This suggests that Kopechne survived the initial crash and was conscious long enough to find an air pocket. As an experienced rescue diver, Farrar knows that these air pockets can sometimes last for hours before the oxygen in them runs out. So it's possible that Kopechne suffocated rather than drowned, and if emergency services had been called to the scene immediately after the accident, there's a good chance she could have been saved. To Chief Arena, it looks like Ted Kennedy has some explaining to do. He should be finished with his statement by now, so Arena decides to head back to Edgartown to see what he has to say. Arena arrives at the police station just after 11 a.m. On the way into the building, he passes a crowd of locals, tourists, and journalists, but again he ignores them and heads straight inside. Poking his head into the unused accounting office, Arena sees Kennedy pacing the room as Markham sits at the desk, writing out the statement by hand. A moment later, Markham tears off the page from the yellow legal pad and hands it over to Chief Arena. Arena looks it over. The writing is a bit sloppy, with some words crossed out and replaced. It's still mostly legible, but Arena suggests he type it out for the official record. Markham agrees, so the three men head down the hall to Arena's office. Arena takes a seat at his desk, and Markham watches over his shoulder as he types. It doesn't take long to copy. The entire statement is only 3 paragraphs long. But Arena is mostly focused on getting the words right, rather than scrutinizing the statement's actual content. But he can already see there's no real explanation of why Kennedy took so long to contact the police. When he's done typing, he gives a carbon copy to Kennedy and Markham to look over. Kennedy nods his approval. It's been transcribed correctly. But he does have one request. Before he signs the statement and makes it all official, he'd like his family lawyer, Burke Marshall, to look it over. Chief Arena doesn't object. As long as the statement is still delivered to him promptly, it won't be a problem. With that, Kennedy gets up to go. But before Arena can let him leave, he has a request of his own. He needs to see Kennedy's driver's license. Kennedy glances at Markham, and then explains he doesn't have his wallet with him and isn't even sure where it is. Chief Arena frowns. Technically, it's a crime not to present a driver's license when reporting an accident. Combined with the fact that Kennedy left the scene and took so long to come forward, Arena could arrest Kennedy on the spot. But he quickly pushes this idea from his mind. It's already been a long morning. So instead, Chief Arena tells Kennedy he can drop off the license later. Then he leads Kennedy and Markham toward the rear of the building, helping them avoid the growing crowd out front. And as he says goodbye, Arena has no idea that the unsigned statement in his hand will be the only information he gets from Kennedy for days to come, or that the brief document is riddled with omissions and errors. In the statement, Kennedy puts the time of the crash at 11:15 p.m. But Deputy Sheriff Huck Look saw the Oldsmobile on the road nearby around 12:45. That's an unexplained 90-minute discrepancy. The statement also doesn't mention anything about the boozy cottage party. Rescue attempts are omitted as well. Arena just thought Markham was a friend, helping Kennedy out, not that he was also involved in the case. But now it's too late to question either man any further. Soon after leaving the police station, Markham and Kennedy fly to Hyannis Port and the safety of the Kennedy family compound there. They aren't the only witnesses taking the opportunity to slip away. Joe Gargan has arranged for the 5 remaining boiler room girls to leave Chappaquiddick altogether. He then quickly settles up their bills with the hotels in Edgartown before departing the area himself. And when the growing throng of media at the police station learn that Kennedy has slipped out of town, they're furious. And Chief Arena only fuels their outrage when he refuses to share Kennedy's statement without the senator's permission. To the press, it begins to look like this small-town police chief is being played. It's an assessment that County Prosecutor Walter Steele agrees with. He lives nearby, and when he shows up to the police station later in the morning, he quickly determines that Chief Arena could use some help. Inside the station, Steele tracks down Arena and asks to see Kennedy's statement. Looking it over, the prosecutor immediately sees red flags. Kennedy claims that he drive himself and Kopechne to the car ferry on the west side of the island, but took a wrong turn east toward the beach where the accident occurred. But Steele points out that the land on a bump track and not realize he'd gone wrong. And Kennedy's story about what happened after the crash is just as suspicious. In his statement, he claims he was in a state of shock and exhaustion, and that's why he didn't report the accident sooner. Steele quizzes Arena an emotional state when he seemed fine. He showed no obvious distress, and Arena could see no physical sign he'd been in a car crash at all. Something doesn't add up. In Steele's eyes, Kennedy should be looking at a charge of leaving the scene of an accident at the very least. But Chief Arena just lets out a sigh. He clearly isn't thrilled at the idea. But there's no getting away from the facts, so he walks away to call the district attorney's office. Steele doesn't envy Chief Arena's predicament, but he's confident he's just saved Arena an even bigger headache down the line. Because if Senator Kennedy is lying to them about what happened, the last thing they want to do is look like they're joining the cover-up.
I'm Leon Neyfakh, best known as the co-creator of Slow Burn and Fiasco. I had, of course, but always with a distant and quiet, a silent judge who is actually using this platform.
Hi, I'm OnlyFans creator and comedian Gracie Kanan.
I work from home now. I'm on OnlyFans. And in case you guys don't know,
journalistic curiosity got the best of me when I found out that my own sister had started an OnlyFans account.
I'm not his sister, just to clarify.
It turns out a lot of what I thought I knew about OnlyFans was wrong.
I felt like I wasted 3.5 years for something that wasn't real.
What happens when connection comes with a price tag? Only Fantasy wherever you get your podcasts. Or binge all episodes of Only Fantasy ad-free right now, only on Audible. Start your Audible subscription in the Audible app or on Apple Podcasts.
Whether you're exploring your current fascinations or discovering new ones, Audible has all the stories that'll introduce you to your most fascinating self. Tap into a whole new world of heated conversations with a saucy romantasy series. Become your friend group's sci-fi expert on the latest blockbuster book-to-screen adaptation. Or find unexpected reveals through the exclusive episodes of a viral true crime podcast. However you choose to listen, Audible keeps you fascinated so you can be just as fascinating. All in one easy app with plans now starting at $8.99. You'll get access to over 1 million audiobooks and podcasts, including trending bestsellers, the hottest new releases, and exclusive podcasts you won't find anywhere else. Sign up now to become a member and get any audiobook every month, plus exclusive podcasts. Plans now start at $8.99. Audible. Be fascinated. Be fascinating. As County Prosecutor Walter Steele digs further into the accident on Chappaquiddick, he comes to the conclusion that an autopsy on Mary Jo Kopechne should be performed. It's still unknown exactly how long she survived inside this car. Better to be thorough to avoid any hint that Ted Kennedy is getting special treatment. Steele passes this recommendation along to the district attorney's office. But the issue devolves into a game of hot potato. The DA decides to let Edgartown Police Chief Dominic Arena make the call. Arena then defers to the local medical examiner, but he punts the decision back to the DA. None of them seems to want the responsibility for ordering an autopsy in such a politically sensitive case. It means that in the end, no autopsy is performed. Instead, Mary Jo Kopechne's body is released to her family and flown to Pennsylvania for the funeral. By then, Ted Kennedy is back at his family's compound in Hyannisport, Massachusetts. More than a dozen legal and political advisors have joined him there. They include Ted Sorensen, the renowned speechwriter and top lawyer in the John F. Kennedy administration, and Robert Mack.
so good. Oh my God. I see you, man. Goodbye. Colder outside than what my air conditioning is set to. So my air conditioning is shut off. But I'm warm still.
RT4.
Former U.S. Secretary of Defense. This legal team works downstairs in the main house while the political team huddles upstairs with Kennedy himself. But as the day goes on, the lawyers become frustrated. They suspect Kennedy isn't sharing the full truth of what happened on Chappaquiddick, and they're dismayed that he seems more focused on the potential political fallout than any legal consequences. But while the aides and lawyers jostle for Kennedy's attention, also lingering around the compound are Paul Markham and Joe Gargan. They are the confidants who were with Ted Kennedy on Chappaquiddick in the hours just before and after the accident, but they've been excluded from the team meetings in the main house. Gargan feels especially hurt, and it's not just because he's been shut out of the inner circle. Based on the side-eyed looks he's been getting, Kennedy's other advisors somehow hold him responsible for the accident and the failure to report it. As the sun begins to set, Gargan makes his way down the dock, hoping that the sea air will help clear his head. A moment later, Paul Markham joins him. They both light cigarettes. Gargan takes an opportunity to vent. Gargan begins by recounting a disturbing conversation he had earlier in the day with one of Kennedy's lawyers. He told Gargan that Kennedy is planning to invoke attorney-client privilege with both Gargan and Markham. Markham is taken aback by this. While he is technically a lawyer, he doesn't represent Kennedy and never thought he did. Stripping naked and trying to rescue a woman from an upturned car isn't something attorneys typically do. And even when he went to the police station with Kennedy to finally report the accident, Kennedy never asked for his legal advice. So Markham doesn't understand. But Gargan can see exactly how this might play out. Soon, the public will learn that Ted Kennedy waited more than 9 hours to report the accident, and that he spent much of that time with Gargan and Markham. Kennedy, of course, will claim that he was in shock, and that's why he didn't go to the police. At that point, people will either have to believe Kennedy's story and question why Gargan and Markham didn't call in the accident themselves, or they'll think Kennedy is lying and assume Gargan and Markham are working with him to orchestrate a cover-up. Either way, Joe Gargan and Paul Markham will be blamed. And if they're bound by lawyer-client privilege, they won't be able to speak publicly about what really happened. They won't be able to defend themselves. They won't be able to say that they risked their lives to save Mary Jo Kopechne, or that they were begging Kennedy to report the accident before he abruptly ditched them and swam back to the hotel alone. It's clear to Gargan that Kennedy is willing to sacrifice the reputations of his friends if it helps him save himself. Feels like a slap in the face. Gargan isn't just another aide to be used and discarded. He's family, and he's been Kennedy's loyal protector since he was 10 years old. Aggrieved, Gargan explains that he'll be getting his own outside lawyer to advise him in the case, and he suggests Markham do the same. While Gargan and Markham take steps to protect themselves, the following 24 hours are marked by indecision and inertia within the Kennedy camp. Kennedy himself remains hidden away inside the compound, while his legal and political advisors debate and strategize how to handle the growing crisis. All media requests for comment are rebuffed. Even inquiries from the police are stonewalled. But that silence soon backfires. When Edgartown Police Chief Dominic Arena fails to hear back from Kennedy or his lawyers as promised, he decides to share Kennedy's unsigned statement with the press. And for the reporters, this short document also raises more questions than it answers. They immediately focus on the long gap between the accident and Kennedy reporting it. The delay seems inexplicable. And with the story now leading news bulletins across the country, the pressure for Kennedy to make a statement grows even further. But still, there's silence from Hyannisport. Before Kennedy says anything publicly, the people around him are desperate to know what, if any, charges may be coming. So they start calling every contact they have, trying to get an inside track. Luckily, this is Massachusetts, and the Kennedys have loyal and influential friends all across the state. Jimmy Smith is one of those. He is both a former campaign aide for Robert Kennedy and a current assistant district attorney in Massachusetts. And at the request of the team at Hyannisport, on Sunday, July 20th, Smith dials up his boss, District Attorney Edmund Denise. Like Smith and Kennedy, Denise is also a loyal member of the Democratic Party. Though he's only 45 years old, Denise has already served terms in both the Massachusetts House and State Senate, and he's been a public supporter of the Kennedys ever since he backed JFK's presidential campaign back in 1960. So there's a reason for Smith to believe Denise will take it easy on Ted Kennedy, but still he can't be sure. A cornerstone of Denise's record as a prosecutor has been his aggressive approach to drunk driving, and in cases Denise prosecution himself. Investigators go looking. It won't take to figure that out. So as Smith waits for Denise to answer his call, he can only hope the DA's political loyalties come first, and that he won't pry into the case too closely. Hello, this is Edmund Denise. Hey boss, it's Jimmy, and sorry to bother you on a Sunday, but you got a moment to talk? You can probably imagine why I'm calling. This business with the senator? I'll give you my 2 cents if you don't mind. All right, go ahead. Well, the media is getting all worked up about the delay in reporting the accident. But here's the thing. Before the crash, before any of this, Teddy had a bad back, right? He nearly died in that plane crash a few years ago. Yeah, I remember. Well, he couldn't even get out of bed on election night. Then he gets banged up pretty badly again during this car accident. So if he says he was feeling too loopy to call it in right away, I'd be inclined to believe him. And I guess I just wanted to gauge where your head's at. Seems to me that it was a miracle that he was even able to save himself. Well, Jimmy, I've had a few calls about this already, as you can imagine, but I don't think I need to get involved. So you're not planning on bringing charges? Rose Kennedy has already lost 3 sons, Jimmy. Her husband's had a stroke. I don't want to be the guy who puts her only living boy in jail. No, this is a local matter, a simple traffic charge. We'll let Edgartown handle it. They'll have to deal with Teddy leaving the scene, of course, but that's hardly the crime of the century. Most likely, he'll have his license suspended for 6 months, and then he can get on with his life. Well, I'm sure that will be a relief for the entire family, Ed. Well, I hope so. And since you know the senator, perhaps you can do me a favor. Pass along a message from me. Oh, yeah, of course. Tell him if he wants me to get involved, to make it look like there's no special treatment, then I will. Otherwise, I'm staying out of it. It's his call, though. As far as I'm concerned, his family's been through enough. Jimmy Smith is relieved to hear that he and Edmund Denise are on the same page. And after Smith hangs up, he immediately begins dialing around to people in Kennedy's inner circle. He's got good news straight from the DA, and it looks like Senator Kennedy is going to get off with a slap on the wrist.
Hello, I'm Matt Ford.
And I'm Alice Levine.
And we're the hosts of British Scandal.
Yes, we are, and our new series starts with a loud, lovable woman from Bermondsey who becomes one of the most famous people in Britain.
This is the story of Jade Cook.
The reality TV star who built a fortune just by being herself.
And then lost everything in one of the most public racism scandals Britain has ever seen.
It's a story of fame.
And a change of the conversation around cervical cancer forever.
Follow British Scandal wherever you get your podcasts or listen early and ad-free on Audible.
Whether you're exploring your current fascinations or discovering new ones, Audible has all the stories that'll introduce you to your most fascinating self. Tap into a whole new world of heated conversations with a saucy romantasy series. Become your friend group's sci-fi expert on the latest blockbuster book-to-screen adaptation. Or find unexpected reveals through the exclusive episodes of a viral true crime podcast. However you choose to listen, Audible keeps you fascinated so you can be just as fascinating. All in one easy app with plans now starting at $8.99. You'll get access to over 1 million audiobooks and podcasts, including trending bestsellers, the hottest new releases, and exclusive podcasts you won't find anywhere else. Sign up now to become a member and get any audiobook every month, plus exclusive podcasts. Plans now start at $8.99. Audible. Be fascinated. Be fascinating. Evening of Sunday, July 20th, 1969. It's been just under 48 hours since Senator Ted Kennedy crashed his Oldsmobile on Chappaquiddick Island. But the media takes a break from that developing story to focus on an even bigger one as the world gathers around their televisions to watch Neil Armstrong become the first person to walk on the moon. It's a bittersweet moment for the Kennedy clan. It was the late John F. Kennedy who launched the Apollo program 8 years ago, promising to deliver this very moment. But right now, the Kennedys' attention is divided between JFK's crowning achievement and getting his youngest brother out of trouble yet again. On Monday morning, July 21st, Police Chief Dominic Arena enters the Edgartown courthouse to begin the process of charging Kennedy with a crime. Arena requests authorization to issue a complaint against the senator for leaving the scene of an accident. In the documents he submits to the court, Arena lists the time of the crash as somewhere between midnight and 1 a.m. In Kennedy's statement at the police station, he said the accident happened around 11:15. But Deputy Sheriff Huck Look claims he saw Kennedy's car driving on the island at 12:45, 90 minutes later, and it's clear that is what Arena believes. The court sets a hearing for a week's time, but while the legal process gets underway, parents of Mary Jo Kopechne prepare to bury their only child. The funeral is held in Plymouth, Pennsylvania on July 22nd. That morning, Gwen Kopechne rides to the church with her husband, Joseph. As soon as their car pulls up, Gwen realizes this isn't going to be an ordinary funeral, though. Townspeople she's never met before line the block, along with TV crews and photographers. As Gwen exits the car with her husband, cameras flash and reporters start shouting questions. They want to know what Mary Jo was doing on Chappaquiddick. Why was she driving with Ted Kennedy? What sort of relationship did she have with him? Gwen grips her husband's hand as they walk silently toward the rectory. But even as the voices of the media fade behind her, their questions linger in her head. She's seen all types of stories in the papers about her daughter in the past 4 days. They've referred to Mary Jo as a pretty blonde and implied that she was just another girl Kennedy snuck off with for an extramarital tryst. But Gwen knows better. Mary Jo was bright, a dedicated young woman who had played a leadership role on Bobby Kennedy's presidential campaign. That's how she should be remembered. In the rectory, the Kopechnes meet with a pair of priests as they wait for the funeral to begin. But a minute or two later, there's a commotion outside. Gwen peeks between the drapes and sees that Ted Kennedy has arrived. A crowd of supporters mob him, and suddenly it looks more like a political rally than a funeral. Kennedy is wearing a large white neck brace. When Kennedy called her the morning after the crash, he didn't mention any injuries, so Gwen can't help wondering whether he's looking for sympathy, but she keeps those thoughts to herself as Kennedy comes into the rectory. Priests excuse themselves, leaving Kennedy and Gwen alone. Kennedy then takes Gwen's hand. He begins offering his condolences, but he's babbling, looking down at the floor, jumping between trains of thought so fast it's hard for Gwen to make out exactly what he's saying. And while Gwen appreciates the gesture, what she really wants to hear is the truth about what happened. All she knows is what she read in Kennedy's flimsy statement to the police. She wants to hear how much he had been drinking and how fast he was driving. Most of all, she needs to know what Kennedy was doing alone with Mary Jo late at night. But as Kennedy stammers on, Gwen thinks better of it. She doubts she'll get a good answer from Kennedy in this state, and besides, this isn't the time or the place. Today is about remembering the life of Mary Jo. So she simply thanks Kennedy for coming, then takes her husband's hand again and makes her way inside the sanctuary. There will be time enough to have her questions answered later. After the funeral, Ted Kennedy heads back to Hyannis Port to strategize for the court hearing, which is now just 5 days away. Ultimately, his lawyers decide to waive Kennedy's right to a hearing and go straight to an arraignment. Now Kennedy faces a much tougher decision: how to plead. Admitting his guilt on the charge of leaving the scene of the accident would get the ordeal over with faster. But Kennedy has a long history of reckless driving. so a guilty plea could expose him to a serious punishment, maybe even prison. But if Kennedy pleads not guilty, then he will have to go to trial. That will drag things out and invite testimony from other partygoers that may prove damaging. In an effort to put this behind them as quickly as possible, Kennedy's legal team ultimately decides to plead guilty, request a suspended sentence, and hope that the judge, James Boyle, takes it easy on him. The arraignment takes place on July 25th, 1 week after the accident. Kennedy pleads guilty at the outset. Then Police Chief Dominic Arena reads his brief summary of the case. There's one tense moment when Judge Boyle asks if Kennedy ever tried to conceal that he was the driver. But Kennedy's lawyer interrupts, and instead of answering the question, deftly changes the subject. Further, finally, Judge Boyle asks if he has any previous record. The officer says no. That's not true, but because Kennedy's other serious traffic offenses occurred in Virginia, this Massachusetts court has no record of them. So with that, Judge Boyle explains that since Kennedy has no previous offenses and there's no evidence he tried to conceal he was the driver, he's giving Kennedy a suspended sentence of 2 months and 1 year of probation. After less than 10 minutes in court, Ted Kennedy is free to go. But that only settles the legal side of things. Now Kennedy has to try and salvage his political career. And as he leaves the decline, he'll be made about and Kennedy prepared with. He gives it one last look and closes his eyes. Nerves. Calm is accepted by the Senator. Concentrate as his family and advisors shuffle out of work, leaving just him and the crew. And counts down to airtime. Okay, sir. 3, 2. Looks into the camera, and then begins to speak. My fellow citizens, I've requested this opportunity to talk about the tragedy which happened last Friday evening. This morning, I entered a plea of guilty to the charge of leaving the scene of an accident. Before, it would have been improper to comment on these matters, but tonight I am free to tell you what happened and to say what it means to me. Kennedy begins by recounting the basic details of why he was on the island that weekend, and then he turns to Kopechne. Mary Jo was one of the most devoted members of the staff of my brother Bobby before his passing. She was such a gentle, kind, and idealistic person. All of us tried to help her feel that she had a home with the family. There is no truth whatever, to the suspicions of immoral conduct that have been leveled at my behavior and hers regarding that evening. There's never been a private relationship between us of any kind, nor was I driving under the influence of liquor. Kennedy then explains the crash, claiming he first tried to save Kopechne himself and then later made another attempt with Joe Gargan and Paul Markham. But now comes the hard part, justifying not reporting the accident for over 9 hours. Although my doctors informed me that I suffered a concussion as well as shock, I do not seek to escape responsibility for my actions. I regard as indefensible the fact that I did not report the accident to the police immediately. All kinds of scrambled thoughts went through my mind during this period. I questioned whether the girl might still be alive somewhere, whether some awful curse did actually hang over all the Kennedys, or whether somehow the terrible weight of this incident might in some way pass from my shoulders. I was overcome by a jumble of grief, fear, doubt, exhaustion, panic, confusion, and shock. But then in the morning, with my mind somewhat more lucid, I belatedly reported the accident to the police. Kennedy continues his account of the incident before finally wrapping the speech by addressing whether he will continue on as senator. It has been 7 years since my first election to the Senate. You and I share many memories. Some of them have been glorious. Some have been very sad. Serve Massachusetts has made my life worthwhile. And so I ask you tonight to think this through with me. In facing this decision, I seek your advice and opinion. In making it, I seek your prayers. When the camera blinks off, Ted Kennedy hopes he's done enough to save his political career. But beyond the walls of his safe haven in Hyannisport, critics are still circling. Rumors are still spreading. Questions are still being asked about what really happened on Chappaquiddick Island. And if anything, Kennedy's speech has only made things worse. American Scandal uses Trump. It's late July 1969 in Martha's Vineyard. Edmund Denise kicks back on the olive green lazy boy reclining chair in his living room. As the district attorney for Southern Massachusetts, he doesn't get much time to relax, and even now he's got work on his mind. On the couch nearby is his friend, the famed trial lawyer F. Lee Bailey. Denise has invited him here to ask for help with a difficult case. It's been 2 weeks since the death of Mary Jo Kopechne in a car crash on Chappaquiddick Island, and a week since Senator Ted Kennedy pled guilty to leaving the scene of the accident. Denise has kept his distance from the investigation, and when Kennedy walked away with probation and a suspended sentence, Denise had hoped that that would be the end of the matter. But then, just hours after his appearance in court, Kennedy went on national TV in an attempt to salvage his political career. That's when things went sideways. The media and much of the public were baffled by his incoherent explanation for his behavior after the crash, and now today seems to bring a new story about Kennedy's history of heavy drinking and reckless driving. So there's growing pressure on Denise to order a more thorough investigation. Is brilliant. Thanks for stopping by. I really need to pick your brain on this Kennedy business. Anything for a DA in need, and I can't say no to a glass of Glenfiddich. Bailey raises his glass, then takes a sip, as Denise lays out his dilemma. Well, I'm in a real pickle here. I genuinely admire the family, his older brothers at least, but I'm starting to think that perhaps my loyalty to the party has clouded my thinking. Maybe I should have taken over the case from the outset. And now you're worried it's too late? Yeah. The press just doesn't seem to buy that he was sober during the accident, or that he did all he could to save the girl. And they're probably right. But he's already pled to leaving the scene, so I can't charge him with that. That only leaves manslaughter. Well, he really blew it with that speech. Calling his own actions inexplicable and indefensible. What kind of lawyer approved that copy? It was like he was begging you to charge him. But do I really want to haul in a U.S. senator? If I won the case, I'd be hated by half the country, and if I lost, I'd look like a fool. But I'm afraid the only way to get to the truth is to have everyone talk under oath, which means it has to be a trial. Maybe not. What do you mean? Theoretically, you could order a judicial inquest into Miss Kopechne's death. An inquest? I can't remember an inquest ever being used in a case like this. No, there's little written law about them. You'd have Kennedy and his buddies would have to talk, and it's technically an investigation, not a trial, so you wouldn't have to worry about the outcome in terms of a verdict. Well, that's interesting. Very, very interesting. I guess I'll get my clerk to dust off the law books and look for that statute. So thank you. I knew you'd have a creative idea, and I think that's earned you another glass. Edmund Denise heads to the kitchen to pour some fresh drinks, and as he pulls the bottle of scotch from the cabinet, he thinks about what F. Lee Bailey said. His idea could satisfy the public's desire to know more about what happened without putting a star member of Denise's own party on trial. A judicial inquest in these circumstances would certainly be unusual. But then again, nothing is normal.
We are live from Fetty's house.
Hundreds gathered around the TV, all connected to reliable Wi-Fi from Xfinity.
Aunt Josie on a video call grilling the referee.
Get reliable fiber-powered gig Wi-Fi with Peacock included to stream the beautiful game this summer. Xfinity. Imagine that. Restrictions apply. New gig internet members only. Speeds vary. Use of fiber coaxial cable. Peacock offer for Peacock Premium with ads. Currently $10.99 a month value. Activation required to access content. Terms apply. Peacock must be activated within first 90 days. Manage existing subscriptions to avoid multiple charges. Third-party subscriptions continue until canceled.
With the Spark Cash Plus card from Capital One, you earn unlimited 2% cash back on every purchase. And you get big purchasing power, so your business can spend more and earn more.
From Audible Originals, I'm Lindsey Graham, and this is American Scandal. Before the contemplated run for he'd been considerably favorite for the Democratic nomination in 1972, but the death of behavior quickly silenced that talk. Kennedy's political career wasn't over, though. Even after the crash, his support in Massachusetts remained strong. Indeed, polls in the state suggested nearly 80% of voters there wanted him to remain in the Senate. But more than half of those same voters said that he had failed to properly explain what happened on Chappaquiddick. So Kennedy was not out of the woods yet. And thanks to District Attorney Edmund Denise, it seemed he would soon have no choice but to finally come clean. This is episode 4, Under. It's July 1969. Capitol in Washington, D.C. Ted Kennedy strides onto the Senate floor with a broad grin on his face. Today is his first day back in the chamber since the accident on Chappaquiddick 2 weeks ago. And as Kennedy walks around the floor, he's met with handshakes and slaps on the back. His office has already been flooded with letters from supporters, and now his fellow senators are making it clear that they're happy to see him too. Kennedy approaches West Virginia's Robert Byrd, one of his closest friends on the Hill. Byrd greets him with a smile and pulls Kennedy in for a bear hug. But just as the men separate, Kennedy feels a tap on his shoulder. Kennedy turns to see an aide from his office. The aide asks if there's somewhere they can speak in private for a moment. Kennedy is annoyed by the interruption, but judging by the serious look on his aide's face, he figures he'd better hear him out. Kennedy guides the aide into a large cloakroom just off the Senate floor. And once inside, the aide hands Kennedy a letter that he says arrived at the office only moments ago. It's from the Massachusetts District Attorney Edmund Denise. Kennedy frowns because this can't be good. As he reads the letter, his instincts are quickly confirmed. Denise is writing to inform Kennedy that there will now be an inquest into the Chappaquiddick accident. There isn't much detail beyond that. Kennedy turns the paper over, confused, looking for further information that isn't there. So he peppers his aide with questions.
We'll be ending the stream soon. You're in. Thank you.
Demanding to know if he'll have to testify under oath, if other witnesses will be called, or if this inquest will be open to the public. The aide puts up his hands because he doesn't have the answers. He didn't even know an inquest was possible at this stage. He just wanted Kennedy to see the letter before the press starts asking about it. Kennedy begins pacing the room. His confusion, though, quickly gives way to anger. After the crash, he spent a week hunkered down with some of the best legal and political minds in the country. They assured him that his guilty plea at the hearing and the televised speech afterwards would put Chappaquiddick behind him. Now he wonders what his family is paying them for. He starts to feel dizzy and takes a seat on the couch. Nightmares starting up all over again. And word of the impending inquest does soon spread. But Ted Kennedy isn't the only one confused by District Attorney Denise's decision. To many critics, it seems like Denise is using the inquest as a way to satisfy the public's demands for answers without having to actually charge Kennedy with a crime. Even colleagues within Denise's own office find the idea bizarre. But now that he's chosen this course, they have no choice but to go along with it. The date of the inquest and the procedures it will follow will be decided by a judge. But in the meantime, the DA's office gathers as much information as it can about the accident on Chappaquiddick. Because the original probe by the local police was so thin, it's quickly decided that a new investigation will be needed. So Denise sends a small team to Chappaquiddick to interview potential witnesses and examine the physical evidence. Among the investigators is Bernie Flynn, a detective lieutenant with the state police. The first task he's given when he arrives on Martha's Vineyard is inspecting Kennedy's wrecked car. After in Edgartown, where it's unguarded for weeks, the car is a key piece of evidence, so Flynn decides to have it impounded and towed to a more secure facility. So on a sunny August morning, Flynn arrives at the repair shop to supervise the Oldsmobile's removal. He's met by a mechanic who walks Flynn to the sedan. It's in the far corner of the garage, covered in a gray canvas tarp. The tow truck hasn't arrived yet, so Flynn sees that the Oldsmobile's windshield is smashed, with a large chunk of its glass missing. The roof is also caved in, and there's a large dent in the front passenger side door. Flynn's not surprised. It's what he would expect from a car that crashed upside down into the water. But as Flynn circles around the sedan, he's disturbed by what else he sees. The gas cap is missing, as well as strips of chrome from two of the wheel wells. And when he opens the driver's side door, he finds holes where the ashtray should be. Even the gas pedal is missing. Flynn is puzzled. It's possible the exterior pieces broke off during the crash and were lost in the water, but he's never heard of a crash that ripped off all the ashtrays. Flynn turns to the mechanic and asks what happened to all the missing pieces. The mechanic explains that he spent the last 2 weeks shooing away curious tourists who wanted to take a look at Senator Kennedy's now famous car. Some of them must have snuck back in after hours and helped themselves to souvenirs. Flynn lets out a deep merits of launching a new investigation so late in the game, and now the most important item of totally compromised. He starts to think that maybe his friends in the DA's office are right. This entire process is a waste of time, designed solely to get the media off Denise's back. But despite his growing skepticism, Flynn has no choice but to soldier on. So he joins 2 other investigators as they begin to interview witnesses. The most valuable people to question would be the other partygoers from the cottage, but by now they've all lawyered up and are declining to talk. So Flynn and his colleagues have to make do with the other people who saw Kennedy in the hours before and after the crash. They talk with 2 men from that weekend's regatta who partied with Kennedy the afternoon before he was They won't share details about how much Kennedy was drinking. But one of them does reveal he stayed at the same hotel as Kennedy and spoke with him the morning after the accident. He says Kennedy looked perfectly healthy and in good spirits, but the crash. And that's why that story statements with the evidence from Deputy Sheriff Huck Look, Flynn develops an alternative theory about what really happened that night on Chappaquiddick. Flynn thinks that Mary Jo Kopechne, drunk and probably looking for a secluded beach to be alone with the young woman. But he was driving too fast, missed his turn, and ended up on a dirt lane. Realizing his mistake, he started backing up. But when he got back to the main road, he spotted Deputy Look approaching the car. Kennedy saw Look's police badge in the rearview mirror, and fearing he would be caught drunk driving, he slowed down Dyke Road about being drunk. Farther down the road, Kennedy got out of the Oldsmobile and instructed Kopechne to take over. Flynn theorizes that the plan was for Kopechne to drive to the end of the road, turn around, and come pick Kennedy up when the coast was clear. But Kopechne had also been drinking and was now left in control of a car she'd never driven on an unfamiliar island with no streetlights. A short time later, she crashed into the water. Kennedy was unaware of this, and after waiting a while, he figured she wasn't coming to pick him up. So he made his way back to the hotel in Edgartown. To Flynn, this would explain why Kennedy was so relaxed when he was seen by witnesses the next morning, because Kennedy had no idea the crash had even happened yet. With this theory in mind, Flynn finds himself feeling sorry for Ted Kennedy. He thinks Kennedy probably made up the story about driving Kopechne to the ferry to avoid telling people the truth that he was driving drunk and trying to cheat on his wife with a pretty young campaign aide. In Flynn's mind, those are small-time offenses, not worth losing a career or going to jail over. But now, Kennedy will be forced to stick with his lie under oath. Kennedy thinks this is a waste of time. So